recording, that'd be great.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the North Santiam Sewer Master Plan Town Hall. It's July 14th, 2021 at 6 p.m. or 6:01 to be accurate, held by Zoom and webinar. We'll be looking at the North Santiam Canyon Wastewater Master Planning. Well, that's what we'll be looking at, but it is the Town Hall number 2. This will be uploaded on YouTube, and we are being live over KYAC 94.9 FM Mill City. Introduction. I'm Ken Woodward. I'm the chairperson for the North Santiam Sewer Authority. We have Danielle Gonzalez, Marion County. We have Peter Olson, Keller and Associates, project manager. Dallin Stevens with Keller and Associates, senior engineer. And we have McCoy Carmichael with Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments. I will now turn it over to Danielle Gonzalez. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. We put together this webinar to try to help people access the information for the North Santiam Sewer Authority Master Plan. Now, this plan has started last summer, late last summer, right prior to the North Santiam area fires. And we had started this project quite a few years ago, and it's moved along in a path. First, we had to kind of get together and get into rooms and communicate and talk. And after only 40 something meetings, so this North Santiam Sewer Authority was formed. It was formed under what is called an intergovernmental agreement. It's an ORS 190 organization. Marion County has supported the staffing, which is me, as well as most of the funding to date. All of the funding, excuse me, to date. So just want to let you know, our goal for the North Santiam Sewer Authority has always been to find a solution for all of the communities in the North Santiam Canyon, being Mill City, Gates, Detroit, and Idanha, for a system that would be geologically suitable, environmentally sustainable, financially feasible, and politically viable. And some of those are a balance. And you'll kind of hear a little bit about that tonight as we're trying to move forward on the approval of a master plan. So we'll see how all of this works out, and if there's good questions and all that kind of stuff, and we'll do our very, very best to answer questions that we know. If there are questions that we don't know the answer to, or it's a little too early in our process to give some advice on that, we'll just let you know. So we're going to do the best we can to answer those questions. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our engineers with Keller Associates, Peter Olson and Dallin Stevens.
Right. Appreciate it. Let me get my screen shared and we'll start the presentation here. McRae, it looks like it disabled. There we go. Thank you. All right. Are we seeing that screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, we'll give it a second here. Is that showing up yet? It's showing up on mine. It shows that it's being shared.
On our side, it doesn't look like it's popping up, Peter.
All right, let me do it again. I apologize.
You may have to actually go into the window that you're looking at.
All right. That might work better this time. All right. Are you seeing that now?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So Town Hall number 2, glad to be here at this point and glad to be here to discuss the North Santiam Canyon wastewater master plan tonight. We'll move through some slides a little quicker than others. Some of it's a recap from the previous one, but still wanted to cover some of those topics. We've got here today, as Danielle mentioned, I think she's done introductions and kin, and we can move past this slide. As far as staying informed, you got the Sewer Authority's website there, and then the next board meeting is August 5th. We have the outreach efforts that have been going on throughout the process of the master planning and the overall effort over the years, with all these items, with council meetings, legislature meetings, the sewer authority meetings, and then the website as well. There's lots of avenues, the radio interviews, and this being broadcasted on the radio as well tonight. So the report status and what we're going to cover today, we'll summarize the master plan development process and the project recommendations. We'll discuss, summarize the planning criteria that was discussed last time, and then discuss the Mill City existing system evaluation. And then we'll dive into the collection, the treatment, and the disposal, how we came about that process evaluation and the recommendations there. And then we'll have an opportunity for questions and comments. As far as next steps after that, we'll look at revisions based on feedback and input, additions, and address those final comments and revisions, and look to present to the board and adopt the master plan. Something I wanted to share with in the town hall is the historic efforts. You know, this is a flow chart showing historically the large amount of effort that has gone in to putting community sewer systems in the canyon communities. Shows for the various communities different efforts that have happened over the time. We look down at the bottom, towards the bottom, we have the 2017 with the regional wastewater analysis, and then the master planning process now in 2021. Now we come to the master plan. We've come to a point where we have draft reports ready and have gone through the process of reviewing with the TRC and with the board, and we're here for this presentation tonight. In the previous town hall is the next 4 slides cover much of the information that was in the previous town hall. We have population for the planning criteria. We looked at collecting a lot of data, working with the published data, the Portland State University populations. We looked at sisters as a case study for what it would look like when these communities do get a community wastewater system, and what that effect might have on the population projections. We looked at environmental resources for the canyon communities. We looked at establishing the flows. We looked at Mill Cities since they're the community of the 4 that has an existing system. Looked at the historic flows and projected those out. And then we looked at the winter water usage for Idanha, Detroit, and Gates to give us an idea of what the average dry weather flows would be for the new wastewater systems. And then used the peaking factors that were developed in the process and projected those flows out to know what to plan for. And then we provided additional capacity as well for future industrial commercial users that may connect to the systems. We did the similar analysis with the raw wastewater loadings, looking at Mill City's historic and projected those, as well as recognizing that they are a effluent system only, and so the loading would be different and if it was ended up being a gravity system. Our data collection process was pretty lengthy, collected a lot of data from each city. This is just representative of some of the cities and Mill City specifically with their existing system. As I mentioned, we looked at the population and the First Sisters, and then we used that to help inform the projections that we discussed with the TRC and the board and agreed upon what those projected numbers would look like.
So on this one, Peter, if I could stop for a second, it has it has Gates, Mill City, Lyons, and Mahama on our original look that we did in 2017. After we were kind of in the planning stages, Lyons actually did not want to move forward. And so while they're in the initial planning stage for the feasibility study, they were not included in the more final information.
Thanks, Danielle. This is just a representation of the amount of data that was collected and processed, evaluated, and looked at for Mill City as the existing system, but also the new systems for Gates, Detroit, and Idanha. We looking at is what I explained already with the flows, looking at the existing flows or demands for the water system and using those to help inform what the wastewater flows would be. Looking for questions as far as missed items there, anything that was missed from that planning criteria. And as I mentioned, this is a bit of a review from the previous town hall. And I'm looking to Danielle for those questions.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in particular. We have one question that we'll hold off just a little bit more when you get to the life cycle information, and I'm not seeing anything else in the chat right now.
Okay.
The only thing is about the city of Lyons, and so I'm going to answer that one in the response.
Okay, thank you. So Mill City's existing system, we did an evaluation of the system as far as how the treatment plant, the water pollution control facility was operating. Was it meeting the criteria? Was it, how did it compare with its capacities? Mill City's system is their collection system is what we call a STEG. It's a gravity hybrid from a pressure system. And so a septic tank effluent gravity, it does have pressure step systems as well, which is septic tank effluent pump. And the treatment, it is a remote treatment, so it holds back the solids in the septic tanks. Some, minor amounts that are in the effluent get through, but that treatment happens in the remote treatment with a recirculating sand filter. And then for disposal, it's disposed to a large drain field that is adjacent to the water pollution control facility. Its performance that we reviewed and summarized was that it's observed that the historic flows have exceeded the rated capacity. When we started, it had come close. And then by the time we had finished and added additional data to supplement that, it showed that it had exceeded the rated capacity for the peak day flows. There's no redundancy in the recirculating sand filter, and the components are failing with the pumps, the minor components of the pumps, the fans, valves. There needs to be some attention provided to that system to maintain and operate it in continuation. Now we get into the collection system overview. It's we consider different alternatives. looking at the treatment and disposal basins, with the 4 different communities, where they're located, adjacent, how far are they separated, so on. Looked at transfer pump stations and force mains, and looked at potentially an overhaul of Mill City's existing collection system, the STEG, and then looked at STEP versus gravity in Gates, Detroit, and Idanha. A little review of what STEP and STEG and gravity is. The STEP is septic tank effluent pumping. The STEG, as I mentioned, is the septic tank effluent gravity. The difference being the STEP has a pump inside that pumps it uphill and into a pressurized system. And the STEG comes out of the septic tank and is gravity fed out of the tank into the collection system. As far as a gravity collection system, we've been using this graphic to communicate that. All these pipes are all gravity except for the sewer force main that you see right here. And I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, Danielle. Yes.
Yes, we can.
So this is a force main coming from a pump station. It's larger. It collects it from a topographic basin where everything flows by gravity into the pump station's wet well, and then it is pumped out either to the treatment plant or to another basin where it flows by gravity further on. As far as the basin recommendations, being Mill City and Gates and their proximity, and Detroit and Idanha and their proximity, recommendation there is not to have pipelines between Detroit and Gates for a number of different reasons. The length being the major reason. So we're recommending Detroit and Idanha be combined as one sewer basin, and Mill City and Gates be combined as a sewer basin, and that has implications for the collection system as well as the treatment system and disposal as well. For the regional pump stations, as I mentioned, and we'll have some more graphics to show this in better detail here, but they're looking at transferring the wastewater from the Gates to Mill City to the water pollution control facility site, and then transferring the treated effluent from the Mill City water pollution control facility to the selected disposal site. And then for Detroit and Idanha, it's transferring the wastewater from Detroit to Idanha to a water pollution control facility site, and then transferring that treated effluent from that site to Idanha, from Idanha to the disposal site. And those, Idanha their collection system would be feeding to the same place that the Detroit would be pumping to, and likewise Mill City would retain the same collection system and where it transfers all the wastewater to the water pollution control facility in Mill City. The collection system recommendations, looked at evaluation criteria. We broke it out into 5 different criteria. We have the capital cost with the fixed initial expenses. We have the annual operations and maintenance, which is the annual expenses incurred by the operating, maintaining, and servicing the system. The system reliability, which is the expected, or potential downtimes of the system. And ease of operation. So it's that effort required by the system operator to ensure the system continues to operate. And then for expandability, the 5th one is the flexibility of the system to accommodate expansion. That 5 criteria you can see on the left side of the table here. We, in discussions with the board, put together weighting criteria that sums up to 1, and then looked at the 3 different options of all communities that are on STEP system. Option 2 with the Mill City on the similar STEG system, and then others on gravity. So that would be Gates, Detroit, and Idanha on gravity collection system, And then option 3, Mill City and Gates on the step system, and then Detroit and Idanha being a gravity collection system. We assigned the scoring for the different evaluation criteria, and which resulted in the scores here at the bottom, indicating option 2 as a Mill City on the step, and the other 3 as a gravity collection system.
And I'll throw that out there. There was a very long discussion on this particular piece about the weighting criteria and what was important in those communities. And there are a couple of questions in the Q&A section from John McCormick, and we'll get to those. Peter, in your presentation, you've got the financial pieces broken out. Is that right?
The financial pieces of what these look like?
Yes.
I believe so later. So
okay. So we'll make sure we get to those, John. I see your questions in there. One of the questions, of course, is that the capital cost in one of the systems. Peter, if you could go back one.
Sure.
The capital cost is more expensive in some, and generally when you're doing strictly an engineering type project, you would really look at the capital cost and the O&M and figure out what is the best scenario. When we talked originally in the very beginning, we talked about how you kind of have to balance all of these other pieces, especially on the expandability and the reliability. When you're dealing with 29 miles between Mill City and Idanha, a couple of different calls a day would actually take up a full day for a operator. And so we're trying to take that into consideration. And of course, none of these questions are easy to deal with and all of that stuff. So, if there's some different weighting that needs to happen, or if we're not looking at all those options that we've presented here, I know that's a question that John McCormick has had, and we'll try to get to that in the financial pieces.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
This is the graphic representations of the collection system. So the existing Mill City collection system, this just shows what is already existing there, but adds the force main transfer from Gates to Mill City. We have Gates with the 3 lift stations and the regional lift station indicated, the 3 lift stations here in yellow, and the regional lift station located here with the force main transfer to Mill City. The green lines are the gravity collection lines, and the yellow lines are the force mains from the pump stations to where they were anticipating they would discharge to the collection system or the regional lift station.
And this would actually answer one of the questions that someone had posted via email a month or so ago. This area on the Lynn County side, on the other side of the river, is covered because it's within the city limits. So any of within the city limits between either Marion County or Lynn County would be in this particular plan. And then there was a question about the force main going over the bridge over the Santiam River. And Peter's kind of assured me that is a common occurrence. You have to take some additional precautions and all of that and get approval through DEQ to do that. But that is, yes, a possibility that these locations on if you could use your cursor, Peter, on the Lynn County side right over here would also be involved.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
This shows the potential path of the force main going from the regional pump station to Mill City. This yellow line is a potential path that we put cost estimates to as far as a potential disposal site. That site within Mill City has not been selected. That will be part of subsequent phases of the project. Looking at Detroit's collection system, we have the 3 local lift stations. Then we have the regional lift station, pump station here with the force main heading towards Idanha.
The reason that all of the force mains on Detroit in particular have to go up to Idanha, which you would which in general, people would question, pumping uphill. But after a lot of review, we were not able to really locate, and Peter's, tell the truth on this one if there's anything I'm saying wrong, but we weren't able to locate a suitable location in the Detroit area that was flat enough or had enough space, or doesn't impede on the 3 basin rule for us to actually do any discharge or anything there.
Yeah, the disposal is the major challenge of this project. And yeah, there's even more criteria than that, and just lots of discussions with the regulatory agencies, with and other everyone in the technical review committee.
Yes.
Idanha, this is reflecting the potential collection system here. We have the force main coming from Detroit, which would end here at the potential site for a treatment plant, or water pollution control facility is the proper name. And then Idanha's collection system would come and feed down to that same location. After it is treated, it would be pumped to the upper end. And this is, as Danielle mentioned, a major hurdle and challenge for the wastewater in this area is disposal, and how to do it appropriately, how to be consistent or compatible with the 3 basin rule.
Yeah, disposal of treated
Effluent.
Yes.
At a higher level of treatment than would typically otherwise be required.
Yes.
This shows what I've already mentioned, the Detroit Regional Pump Station pumping to Idanha, the water pollution control facility, the potential site there. These sites are not acquired, they are potential sites. I want to emphasize that. And same thing with this site, which is a Forest Service property. We've started discussions, and there's a lot to work on as far as that as a disposal site. A lot of challenges and hurdles to work through. But this just shows the location of that relative to Idanha. Danielle, any specific questions on the layouts of the collection systems?
So I'm gonna do my best. Let's see, John's got quite a few here. Hold on. Let me quickly. The collection system of, the collection system of a step system versus a steg system versus a gravity is approximately, according to John, they're saying it's $8 million difference than the gravity system. And that step is cheaper than gravity. And so I think I'm going to try to answer this one as best I can. Part of the reason the Sewer Authority has given Keller Associates the guidance on the upfront capital cost is more likely to be covered than the O&M costs in the future. And so they've made some policy decision on that. Of course, all of those things are being reviewed all the time because those policy pieces are going to change. Let's see, that one's a different one. Okay, it says in the last sewer meeting, Peter from Keller suggested that there were many issues with the step systems, offering examples, saying it was a long list. On the collection side, out of the 4 that John McCormick has reviewed, he says that he finds the arguments to be weak or incorrect. The O&M cost for the step systems, I think you're talking about a specific product that's cheaper, not necessarily step systems in general. It looks like Peter considered the O&M cost for the step system pump replacements twice per decade for a 10-year cost of $1 million over time. And then he has a specific vendor, Arenco Prelos pumps that have a 10-year warranty, and he doesn't think that we're taking that into consideration. Saying that there is 0 cost for the first decade of replacement pumps because of their warranty. And that given these numbers, they're concerned that the annual cost might be much higher. Is there anything that we can help to answer that? I know it's a long one.
Other than I hear you, and we'll look at that and we'll discuss that with the board.
I think that particular piece, again, we said it out loud that the capital cost, sometimes you're pushing the capital cost because you're more likely to get funding through the capital cost, especially with the infrastructure funding that is coming this way versus the O&M down the road. And with O&M, as much as pump replacements and all of that, it's more problematic. Typically, it's your the maintenance pieces that cost that are also included in that. Is there anything, Dallin? Do you have anything on the pump issue about these Prelos pumps that they don't have to have any replacement or anything like that? Is that a familiar piece at all?
Yeah, we assumed a 10-year life on the pumps and the step systems when we did our cost evaluation.
Okay, great. So right outside of their warranty, and that is in the cost estimation. And then the maintenance of those were in the cost estimation as well?
Correct.
Okay. And what part of maintenance were you including in that particular piece?
Both the labor needed by the operator to service those pumps, as well as any replacement of bearings, seals, or any other components of the pump that can be replaced without replacing the entire pump.
Okay. Thank you. That helps. Okay. I think we got that one. And so another question about the state park and ranger station. This is in the collection system. So let's talk about that real quick.
So the state, there you're talking about adding the state park?
Yeah, so we didn't include the state park or the ranger station in this initially. When you're going after, this is me just kind of talking through it. When you go through federal funding, it is forbidden to use federal funding to enhance other federal property. So the state park and the ranger station are technically outside of the city limits. And so we can get the lines as close as we can and stay within city limits. And then the parks, state park or the ranger station can connect the rest of the way. And that's actually has been under discussion. And Peter, we put some flexibility on the expandability. Am I correct in that scenario?
Yes, the anticipated flows and loading, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And I hope that answers that question. Okay. Okay, let's see. And some of these other ones are very specific on costs. So we'll have to keep moving forward. Okay, go ahead, Peter.
Right.
Any other questions that anybody has? I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. So please feel free.
All right.
And then we'll try to keep answering questions along the way.
All right, as far as the treatment system overview, excuse me, and Dallin, step in anytime you feel appropriate. But as far as the treatment plant considerations, they're driven by the regulations, those permitting requirements, and the site suitability. This is a challenge in the Canyon communities because of the not necessarily because of the 3 basin rule, but because of the high water groundwater quality requirements to discharge to groundwater. It requires a higher level of treatment. We'll talk about what that mechanical treatment plant, what the overview looks like. And then the other thing to consider is the treatment plant will need one for each basin. So the one for the Detroit Idanha Basin and one for the Gates Mill City Basin. And then talk about the potential treatment plant sites. So the mechanical treatment plant would include primary treatment, typically screening, grit removal, and these types of details will also be honed in with the facilities planning study in the subsequent phases and working with the DEQ for approval. as we look at the permitting process as well for permitting through the DEQ. So it includes primary treatment, as you see there, the secondary treatment, biological treatment with filtration. And then as far as and prior to disposal, having UV disinfection and discharging to infiltration basins. And then the solids that are a result of the treatment process are anticipated to be hauled to landfill. For Mill City Gates potential treatment plant site, we've indicated this is right here is the existing gravel bed filter. And then you have the existing drain fields with backup land for the drain fields. And then the existing recirculation tank that supplies the gravel bed filter. And then this area we're slating or anticipating that it could be a potential site for the treatment plant, and that, you know, the final location there will depend on other steps, subsequent steps of the process. And this is a Mill City property and not the sewer authority, and so those are types of I don't want to say challenges, but those are just aspects that we're going to have to work through. For Detroit Idanha, we had a graphic of this location off the Santiam Highway. And this is right near, correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, is it Blowout Road? I'm a little nervous, might be missing the name on that one. Maybe it's Old Blowout Road. So across on the north side of the highway. So, but this is the potential site. It represents, you know, what we're talking about with the type of treatment that would be required, and having an operations building as well.
And the complexity on this particular site when we're looking at this is because Highway 22 doesn't actually look like this right now. And so we would have to work with ODOT to talk through how we can get a secured pathway so trucks can cross safely in that area. It's probably one of the, if we were talking, I believe we were talking about this, Peter, that is one of the only areas where it's pretty straight and you can see a little bit up the road. And so it would pose one of the safer options.
Yeah, it's another challenge that the project's going to have, but working and getting designing and access there, a protected turn lane for both directions there. That will be a part of the project. So as far as treatment system questions.
I'm not seeing any treatment specific questions. I'm seeing just step versus steg questions, and I'm seeing with John, and then let's see, oh, moments, okay. Okay, this question says, it was contacted by Peter regarding testing to aid with the 3 basin rule. I've not heard back regarding the need for the location for the testing. Is this down the road later, or can I put this subject to bed? So this would be up in Idanha.
And this is testing for a specific site?
Yes, it was the testing, I believe, for the
infiltration adjacent to the highway there.
Adjacent to the McCoy concept.
Oh yes, we're in the process of working through the finalization of the master plan, and then looking forward for that. I don't have a specific timeline. We anticipate still moving forward with that, and scoping that process, and those next phases is happening right now. But right now we also need to finalize the master plan and focus some efforts there.
Yeah, I'll throw this there. Yeah, the master plan gives permission for the engineer to move forward on the next piece, and the next piece becomes the testing for water. DEQ requires a year of testing. Am I correct in that,
yeah,
Peter?
A year of monitoring. So we do some testing with infiltration, sampling, and monitor that. It'll take at least a year. We've had those discussions with the DEQ to better understand what they're going to be looking for and the criteria that it's going to have to meet, kind of defining defining that issue as best we can. So moving into the next phases, we can properly evaluate and assess it.
Okay. Any other questions in the chat or Q&A section on the treatment systems we're looking at? Of course, and I don't know, and I'm sorry if I missed this, the treatment and the collection, depending on the type of collection you do, the treatment system, does that change?
It does. It requires additional chemicals. Dallin would be able to talk more specifically to this, but the treatment process, because it has to produce a higher level of effluent, that it does require additional. If with a step system, because the solids are pulled out in the septic tanks, it would require introducing and what Dallin, I think you would call carbon, and for the biological process to work properly, and that comes at a cost.
And if I can just clarify a little bit on that, Peter, that that difference in cost is primarily a annual operations and maintenance cost, but does not necessarily translate into significant differences in capital cost.
Correct. Yeah.
And one of the questions asked, what were the differences in treatment plant costs between the different collection system options? And Dallin, I'm hoping you had a little bit of
that. Again, I think this is related, and maybe correct me if I'm misunderstanding, but I think this is related to what we were just saying, that the treatment plant capital costs do not vary significantly between whether the collection system is a step or a gravity type system.
Gotcha.
The differences are primarily in those operations and maintenance costs associated with adding some sort of carbon source to feed the biology that is providing treatment.
So what requires less, I guess, the O&M, if you're comparing that particular piece?
Less O&M, less cost is associated with the gravity system, because a gravity system contains the carbon and conveys that carbon or that food source to the treatment plant. A step system removes that food source for the biology in the septic tanks, and therefore additional cost is needed by adding carbon at the treatment plant.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions at this immediate on this piece of it.
Now we'll talk about the effluent disposal, give a system overview here. Again, the disposal system is very heavily driven by the regulations, the permitting requirements, and that site suitability. Very much a large challenge for the North Santiam Canyon area. We're looking at the 3 basin rule. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about an overview of the rapid infiltration basins. And potential disposal sites for the 2 different basins, and we'll discuss those here in the next few slides.
There is a couple questions. Sorry if I could go back for a minute. Let's see. How much carbon does Mill City have to add to the system? Is it true that solids are normally separated out of a gravity system before carbon is added?
So can you repeat the question, because
I'll do my best.
I want to make sure I get that.
Yeah, how much carbon does Mill City have to add to their system?
Oh.
Is it true the solids are normally separated out in the gravity system and before the carbon is added?
Yeah, Mill City has a different treatment process. It treats to a lower level that doesn't require adding that carbon, that biological process. So the flow, there is no carbon added in the Mill City system. So that's the short answer. Okay,
so what I'm hearing from you, and I just want to make sure this is clear, their system was set up prior to the requirements that have increased over time.
There are more stringent requirements that we would have to meet.
Yeah, so what necessarily worked there did not necessarily solve the problem in other communities.
It would not. It worked at that time. It was approved by DEQ. But for what we're trying to do and the disposal limitations with the 3-basin rule and what the regulations we have, it would require a higher level of treatment at this point.
Okay, and another question regarding the transfer line from Detroit to Idanha. It appears the line will run on the south side of Sabrina Highway. I'm not familiar with that one. I'm assuming Santiam Highway.
Oh.
Please comment on how much land width the line would require and how deep as the utilities. Also run along that corridor. Just leaving town, there's a very narrow strip of land with numerous former homes along small lane. Will this line displace any of those homes? Are we talking about?
The force main going from the water pollution control facility to the effluent disposal site. I think that's what I understood from the question.
Yes, that's what I'm understanding too. Please correct if that's incorrect, Miriam.
It's not going to displace any homes. It'll be within the right of way. We're anticipating that being within the right of way.
Wouldn't that be on the north side of 22 Santiam Highway or the south side?
That has not been decided.
Yeah, that's
down the road in design.
Okay, well, know that is a concern, that on the south side, it's very narrow on that side for the right of way.
right.
Great.
Okay, I think that's, okay, that's what I've got for now.
Okay. Looking at the 3-basin rule summary here, established in 1978. I'm regurgitating a lot here on the screen. Modified in 95, and it's meant to improve, preserve, and improve the high quality of the water in those 3 basins: the Clackamas River, McKenzie River, and the basin at the hand here, or the river at hand, the North Santiam River. It prohibits new or increased wastewater surface discharges and hence, because it's surface discharge, requiring an NPDES permit. And that's been very clear. We had many discussions with the DEQ and talked about a number of different ways to try and work around it, but it's very clear, very straightforward what their policies and what they're allowed and not allowed to permit. And we met with stakeholders, the county, downstream cities, state legislators, and as I mentioned, we met with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, what I've been calling DEQ, a number of times, and stating here, underline, emphasis, the Sewer Authority does not anticipate any change or modification to the existing 3-basin rule. That was a key component or criteria of what we were looking at.
And in the past, that was actually one of the things that kind of made it difficult to find a suitable location for that Detroit Idanha area. So this is kind of the work that we've been doing, desperately trying to find a location that was suitable. Work in progress.
So in that search for the 3-basin rule compliant disposal method, we looked at drainage fields, surface infiltration, land application, surface discharge to the North Santiam with modification, but as I mentioned, that was shut down quickly and told not to go that route. And injection wells and aquifer recharge, and what eventually we settled on with the rapid infiltration basin. When we looked at a number of these land application and other options, that was not just one single site that we were looking at. We looked at a number of various sites throughout the canyon, within city limits, outside city limits, in neighboring Forest Service property, so on and so forth. So we looked at a number of different locations, and then also looked at what would be the effluent quality, or expected or required effluent quality for the different disposal methods as well, which plays into what could or could not be done.
And just to kind of reiterate that, is that when we're talking about disposal, we're talking about disposal of treated and potentially even reusable water. I mean, it's really what it comes down to. Please tell me if I'm wrong on that, Peter.
Say that again. I lost the train of thought. I apologize.
Okay, that we are talking about disposal of treated water. We're not talking We're not talking untreated water. We're talking treated water that is a high quality, because that is what is required in the area.
Yeah, meeting the requirements of the groundwater requirements from the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, which come from the state. So,
which are higher in this area than a lot of places.
and I would disagree a little bit with that. It's just the groundwater quality requirements for the types of systems that we're able to do or able to look at for the disposal they have high requirements
Gotcha.
because of ammonia limits and so on. So.
Okay, thank you.
So as far as disposal of the rapid infiltration basins, these were just some examples of what they may look like. This is not the design. That will come in subsequent phases of the project, obviously, but to get an idea of what they could look like. In looking at and evaluating direct infiltration, both basins, we looked at a number of different properties, getting permission from property owners. To ground truth, what we were seeing with our subconsultant for the geology and the infiltration possibility of the soils, and further and deeper as well, looking down into the aquifers and what the distance between the aquifers and the surface as well. So this is an example of some of the properties that we looked at and did testing at 2 of them. So the what's indicated is the Tom Finsel property there and the Rock Creek property.
Peter, if we could go back to the previous slide. There's a question. It says a treatment plant shows headworks, grit removal, solid holding tanks. These are included in your step evaluation system. Sorry, one more back. It says step will eliminate most of the solid at the source. Also does sorry, let me read this back again. The treatment plant shows headworks, grit removal, solids holding tanks. Are these included in your step evaluation? And it says step will eliminate most solids at the source. Also, does the plant require nitrate removal? And if so, is the denitrification before or after BOD removal?
I'm going to look to Dallin if you want to help me out with some of those answers. I appreciate it.
Okay, I'll do my best. There was a couple questions there, so if I missed one, I apologize. While it is true that a step system does remove some solids, it does not remove all of the solids that may be necessary to be removed with a membrane type filtration system, which may be required to meet the effluent requirements. There are other technologies that could be evaluated, but it is likely that a headworks screening and grit removal system will be required, regardless of what type of collection system is provided upstream. I think that's the first question. The second question, at the second half of that, Danielle, can you read that again for me, please?
Sure. It says, does the plant require nitrate removal? And if so, the denitrification before or after BOD removal?
We are anticipating, based off of what the groundwater quality needs to be at the disposal site, that denitrification will be required. Denitrification and BOD removal occur simultaneously in the process basins.
Thank you. Sorry, give me just one moment. Let me just double check, make sure there's nothing else I'm missing here. Okay. So one other question, John McCormick, Keller's numbers for step versus gravity assumes less than double the additional carbon for step. That cost difference is minimal in the comparison to the total O&M. Has the infiltration and inflow, which dilutes the wastewater and gravity system, also been factored in?
Oh, sorry, I skipped forward. It has been factored in with the flows that we're anticipating.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for that slip up. I went across a key here and it skipped somewhere else in the proposal or in the presentation.
Okay, we're good. Go on.
Right. Gone through that. We discussed the sites. So this is one of the sites that we looked at and did the infiltration testing to ground truth what we're looking at as far as the overall the soil mapping for the for this area.
The overlay is can you go back to that one? The overlay of the brown lines right there, those are the actual, are those the soil maps or is that? Topography?
So the brown it's the soil maps overlaid over that, yes.
And we found that the soil maps that you were using have been pretty accurate.
We ground truth is what I've heard from the sub-consultants, and what we would say here is we ground truth those soil maps. So this is, like I said, this is a potential site. It's not the selected site for the Mill City area. That process still needs to be worked through. In the McCoy site, what we're calling the McCoy site concept, it's in the Detroit Idanha Basin, was quite a bit of a challenge, but we're able to locate an area specific to the that has interesting geology that would potentially allow for disposal, as it creates a little bit longer flow path before it gets to the river. And can be justified as not directly connected. And so we're working through that process and recommending to do additional testing on that site specifically that Danielle had mentioned earlier, doing the infiltration testing, as well as the groundwater monitoring. And that's the process that takes a year. And this is a Forest Service property. And the question earlier that we got was from a private, property owner, I believe, Danielle, up here where we're going to have to do install monitoring wells in that on that property. And so we'd had a conversation, and that question, I believe, derives from that. All right. And then this is a plan view of the same location. Provided by our sub-consultants, GSI. And it's showing potential locations for monitoring wells that would be used for monitoring the groundwater, and other test pits for testing for infiltration and soils, and to be able to do the analysis that they need to do.
And these were sites that were not reviewed prior. That were not reviewed in previous iterations of the engineering reports that were done for the Detroit and Idanha area in the last, I want to say maybe 10 and 20 years. These sites weren't identified previously, so this is kind of a newer concept that we're trying to work through all of the pieces on, and hoping that we can get it to a 3-basin rule compliant site. And because of the distance to the river, I think that gives us a little bit more likelihood that it could pass through DEQ. Initial conversations have happened with DEQ on these particular sites.
Yeah. All right. This is different alternative sites. If we see a dead end here at the McCoy site and that doesn't work, as we work down that path, we've identified a couple other sites that could have potential, but the recommendation from GSI is that the McCoy site, or McCoy concept site, was the better one to start with. It had the most likelihood of succeeding with to meet the requirements.
Specifically because of distance to the river.
Or the lake, yeah.
And the lake, thank you.
Yeah. So questions related to disposal system?
There is a question. Yes, can we get copies of these slides? They are too small to make out what the keys are. Why, yes, yes, and yes. And I'll make sure that if it's not up on the website already, I'll make sure that it is up on the website for you. And then there was another question. How does the population inside the Lions UGB? Oh, Shelley already said that they're on the website. Thank you, Shelley. That means that they're already there. Shelley, let us know where they are on the website so we can direct them perfectly there. And then if not, we'll get those out to you if you have any trouble accessing those. There was a question earlier about the population inside Lions UGB compared to the other city groupings. I'll have to go and look that information. I don't know it off the top of my head. So I'll have to go back and look at that. The key is that so Detroit and Idanha, Mill City Gates, and then there's been question of whether or not Lyons and Mahama would be able to be a part of the project in the future. Lyons originally, when we were talking in 2017, through the feasibility study, we put them in that information packet early on. And then the response that we received from the city staff was that they did not want to pursue that. So we didn't necessarily go on and continued using them in the plan. It was that as well as Lyons urban growth boundary and Lyons, their population estimates and their median household income was so much higher than the rest of the communities, being Mill City, Gates, Detroit, and Idanha, that it would have made any overall project more expensive because they would be less likely to get funding at a favorable level. So if that makes little sense, there was a couple of different reasons on there. And then Shelley mentioned that the slides are on the bottom of the first paragraph on the home page, as well as the calendar. Okay, hold on. There's something else here. So this is still on the step versus gravity. Construction of the gravity system is very disruptive, involving the digging of huge ditches, tearing up roadways, installing manholes, pump stations, and even perhaps obtaining larger easements. The step systems can often be installed on a simple ditch witch and directional boring, which means roadways don't often have to be disturbed. There are no manholes. And is there any response to that? I will also put out there, John, that one of the questions is some of the cities don't actually have utility easements. And so negotiating each one of those utility easements on every single property will be disruptive, but not for the reasons that we thought. So that is also part of the consideration of the financial considerations is, how much time and effort do you want to spend on utilizing legal resources to develop each one of those utility easements. So that's another piece. And is there anything on the, it's asking just, does Keller have a response on this? John, I'm just going to say it out loud. You want the step system, you're not really wanting this gravity system. I understand that. So we're doing the best we can with the decisions we can get there. So one other question here. Let me read through this real quick. It says STEP will reduce electricity use at the treatment plant. STEP reduces, and I'll answer that one, Michael, that just came in. That is actually a decision for a policy decision on whether or not the electricity at the treatment plant or the electricity, a STEP system reduces the cost of electricity at the treatment plant because it puts it back onto the constituent. So the cost is still somewhere. We just got to figure out where that goes. STEP reduces the BOD substantially. I don't know what that is. It says BOD is reduced in the wastewater treatment process by aeration. Aeration is generated by blowers. Blowers use a lot of electricity. Also, a reduction in the BOD and TSS from a STEP system reduces biosolid production. This considered. And that says for capital costs, aeration basins, clarifiers, and sludge digesters can be reduced in size. Were all of these differences factored in? So I'm looking towards Dallin on that one.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot of questions there as well. Maybe I can wait till you get that posted so that I can kind of answer those as they go. Maybe give me the first question again. Let's start there.
Sure. They want to know if I'm gonna boil it down and stop reading it. How about that? I'm gonna try to boil it down. Aeration has blowers. Blowers use a lot of electricity. There's a reduction in BOD, TSS from the STEP system. Are all of those considered in the capital cost? The clarifiers, the sludge digesters, are all of those being considered in the capital cost? And what are the differences and how are they factored in?
Yes, I'd have to go back and look at the capital cost estimates, but I believe those are accounted for. The primary driver, however, for aeration is going to be from your ammonia. That's an order of magnitude, well, maybe not an order of magnitude more, but there is more air required for ammonia, which is not removed in the step system. So while there may be a small reduction in aeration power required because of the BOD removed in the step system versus what would be remaining in the gravity system, it's very minor. In addition to that, we are still adding carbon to this to provide the denitrification. So there is still additional air needed there. Other questions that were a part of that? Sludge,
Yeah.
sludge disposal.
Yep.
Again,
The
same
sludge
fact.
digesters. please.
Yeah, there is no digesters proposed in this option. But sludge removal, again, by adding more carbon, you are producing more biology and you're producing more sludge. So we expect the sludge production, whether a gravity system or a step system is used, to be similar.
Okay. Okay. There is another question. We'll get to this other question that just popped in a moment.
Okay. Are we moving to the next slides,
think so.
Danielle?
Yeah, looks like it. Yes, thank you.
All right. The cost summary. What we're looking at here, we have some short-term improvements for Mill City. That has to do with what we had mentioned very early on in the presentation here about the valves and other short-term improvements or short-lived assets that need to be replaced and in order to keep the plant operating well. And then we have the Mill City and Gates Basin broken up into a few different categories. And then below the line, we have the, other items for land purchase, for pump stations, land for the infiltration basins, and so on. And then those same items repeated for the Detroit and Idanha Basin, and then all totaled up at the bottom. This is, I think, a lot what some questions earlier wanted to see.
Yeah. So one of the questions that came in, I appreciate this, and there's a couple of questions on this particular piece, and I'll do my best to get through those. For the room, the Marion County put in a request through the Oregon legislature after the wildfires for funds for the sewer project. $50 million was authorized under the HB 5006. And at this point, we don't know how that's going to roll to us and how that's going to work. When I say us, I mean Marion County. Marion County is going to have to be the fiduciary in that because that's a significant amount of money that the sewer authority does not have at this point. 40 million of that is intended for the Mill City Gates area. And again, when we put in that request, we put in the request to try to cover nearly all of that amount, but we were not given all of that amount. The Detroit and Idanha area, because we have some additional work that has to happen up there to figure out the engineering piece, there is an additional roughly $9 million for the interim measures that need to happen in the communities that can't get sewer system yet. And those have yet to be worked out. That was a question that came in via email. One of the questions that came in via email, so I just answer it specifically. It says, please address anything you know about the money and cost share that might be available to citizens' septic systems. Also, with septic systems that were put in post-fire, would they get a percentage of their invoice reimbursed? Could there be reimbursement for systems that were new pre-fire? Many citizens are worried about this, and I hope the subject will be addressed. And that they hope that reimbursement for new pre-fire and post-fire systems that have already been installed would be available for reimbursement. This is one of those situations where we don't know that answer yet because the legislature just closed up at the end of July. And so
Or June.
with that,
Yeah.
thank you, end of June. Thank you, wrong month. End of June. And because of that, the information from the state on how those funds will be administered and what, if any, requirements are going to be linked to those funds, we just don't know yet. But we'll continue to update as soon as we know something on that particular one. So there is a question, wait, how many homes are going to be served with 106 million? So that is the question. And I don't remember, I don't have the number off the top of my head. How many sites?
Dallin, what's the total number that we have in the estimates there? I don't want to.
Give me a minute to make sure I'm pulling the correct number.
Yeah, we just want to make sure we have the correct number.
I think it was like something like 15 to 16,000, 15 to 1,600.
100, yeah, 100. We'll get right back to that one.
Yep. Okay.
But yes, it's a high number. So
It's a very high number, which is why we desperately needed the legislature to come forward for either appropriations or earmarks to do this. This is something that has, and that's the question of now or in the future. Thank you. So Marcus asked a question about 15 to 1,600 now or in the future. The calculations from the PSU, which is Portland State University, they do population estimates and housing unit estimates. They estimate once the sewer systems are put in, that population would increase. And so we have to, under the state rules for the funds that we're looking to get, we would have to follow what Portland State's estimates are. Dallin stated the current planning criteria estimates 1,560 homes, and that is lower than Portland State's estimate for the same. And Marcus, this is prior to the fire. This is not since the fire. And unfortunately, those are the best numbers we have. Another question, does Marion County or the North Santiam Sewer Authority plan to pursue other funding sources? Yes, 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 yes. The goal, and we'll get to that financial piece, the goal is to reduce the monthly cost as much as humanly possible, but also getting to a point where we can, what is considered affordable is based on the median household income for the communities. And so as the income level increases in a community, so does the median household income. So the more we can get in grants, the more we can get in appropriations or earmarks, the better, because then we don't have to necessarily contend with that particular piece. And it'll help to keep it as affordable as possible.
Hey Danielle, some of the next slides, if we want to get through that business case analysis and some of the, what those assumptions and what the drivers and so on, should we move on through that, or do you want to keep hitting questions? Yes,
that'd be good. And then the question is how much per EDU? So yes, that would be another question.
Okay. As far as the business case analysis, we brought in a financial consultant to help us look at, what Mill City's been doing, what they have, and looking at the capital costs as well as what the anticipated operation and maintenance costs will be. So when we look at the key assumptions that are driving the economic, the feasibility of the project, we have the capital cost assumptions. So that initial project cost, we have, what grants, and then looking at potential loan terms for whatever portion will have to be local share. And then looking at the O&M cost assumptions, and then the customer assumptions. So what's that, that number of EDUs. And at this stage, we're ignoring the phasing and that connection ramp up.
And the other pieces that are not included in the financial projections. So like things that couldn't be estimated.
So for the financial, sorry, go ahead, Danielle.
Dallin said the Mill City has approximately 700 connections, just so to answer that question.
Okay. As far as the financial goals, it was discussed to that minimize O&M strategy is a financial goal for the sewer authority. And so looking at minimizing ongoing costs, and allowing for that higher upfront costs. The assumptions there, the assumption of the whole strategy is, we're assuming the treatment or the disposal at the McCoy site, the gravity collection system is more costly to build, but less expensive to maintain than a step system. The payoff Mill City debt instead of assuming an annual debt service. So that has to do with there's a existing or outstanding debt that Mill City is making payments on. Instead of assuming those payments by the sewer authority in a transfer of their system, paying off that debt instead of continuing to make those payments would lower the ongoing costs.
It'd be purchasing the assets when there's a negative, when there's still debt on the asset.
Yeah. And then the user rate target, Danielle, I'll let you answer that a little bit more about the 1.4% of median household income. I think that's what you had mentioned a slide or two previously.
Yeah, that is the requirement at the state, at the federal level for funds, which USDA, that they are generally a large funder. At the state level, it's about a 1.2% of median household income, but we're assuming the 1.4.
So the findings working forward from the capital costs to the rates, as we said, we're looking at the project capital costs, the Mill City system acquisition, the grants, appropriations, or earmarks. What is that local share going to need to be, and the debt service on that, the ongoing O&M costs and replacement, and so what that, all those equate to what that total annual costs, and that works into the monthly user rates. There's just a lot of criteria, a lot of items that work into what that user rate's going to be.
So the keys in when we talked about the balance between, financial feasibility and all of that, you don't want to add, you don't want to add a whole other area that's not serviced by these treatment facilities and collection facilities and all of that, if they don't add to the end number of users, right? So if we tried to, there were some questions of whether or not we could cover some areas that were outside of the jurisdictions. And until there's actually enough users on that particular expansion to offset the user rates, then it would be less likely, because of the fact that we're trying to keep those user rates as low as possible. Hold on, there's a couple questions. Okay, this is a step system question. We'll have to keep going on the.
Okay. Just got a slide or two left here.
Yep, right.
So next project phases, pursue the funding, additional funding, property acquisition, Mill City system acquisition, and permitting and land use. And then really, there's two different paths. One's not going to be held up by the other, but they would have potentially different timelines. And so the Mill City Gates is looking at a preliminary engineering report for the mechanical plant and interim disposal, and looking at the short-term improvements, as well as pursuing a disposal site, identifying that site, undergoing negotiations, the testing, monitoring, all for the disposal in the Mill City area. And then the addressing the interim individual septic. For Detroit and Idanha, it's the focus on the McCoy site, that testing and monitoring, and then identifying the treatment site, having those negotiations, and as well as the interim individual septic, similar to the Gates area. This is a project flow chart that we put together, identifying or elaborating on what I was just discussing. It is small, it's hard to read, understand that. This is a link on the website so that you can download and look at it in more detail. Really, it shows it's a process. It's a process that's lengthy. It's going to take a lot of permitting, a lot of reports in order to get the DEQ permits, as well as the design, And everything else involved there shows the McCoy site that, that's the first choice. And if that doesn't work, looking at an alternative site. And then it also shows the Mill City short-term improvements over here playing into that. So with the final, operation and maintenance of the systems when they're constructed.
And just to reiterate, this is actually on the North Santiam Sewer Authority website, so you can blow it up as big as you want. I actually made a big one so I can put it on my wall here to help me understand exactly where things are going. Where you have the arrows that are dashed, it means that, if you don't get there, you have to kind of go back and find something else. So it kind of flows through just like any other workflow would look like. And then this is just the engineering side. For the sewer authority, there's a whole other workflow that has to be happening at the same time. And we have yet to actually get those together on one piece of paper, because as you can imagine, it would be quite lengthy. But the project plans that we have for the sewer authority, I have probably 8 pages of different tasks I've got to get done. We've got to get done just to get to a point where we can include all of these pieces into the engineering and the full plan. There were a couple of questions, and I want to pause and make sure we're answering any questions that are coming in.
We're there.
Yay.
Last slide.
Okay. Okay, there's a couple of questions here. Give me just 1 second to read through them and so I can understand them. Okay, does the step system, including lift stations, did you do a hydraulic evaluation to see if they can be eliminated? And then there's an O&M cost for modern step systems are typically less than $100 a year. I don't know. So I'm just going to speak to just one piece of that. When you have I'm going to ask a question actually in front of you guys. So Peter and Dallin, I know that people that have these advanced technology septic systems in their properties now have maintenance contract requirements that they have every single year. The person I talked to today just signed one for a brand new house, and it was $800 a year for that maintenance contract. Are those things that are also needing to be included in those, or are those completely separate for individually managed systems?
Dallin, do you want to take this one, or do you want it?
Sure, I can go at it. So Danielle, to make sure I'm understanding what your question is, you're asking about advanced septic systems. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which we have a lot in. We have some in Gates. We have some in Detroit and Idanha.
The evaluation that we put together did not include any O&M costs for the advanced septic systems. The O&M costs that we presented are based off of either a step or gravity type system installed for each residence.
And the question then is, how much was that per EDU? In O&M specifically is what the question is asking.
I don't think we broke it out as an EDU cost.
That would be something that I think I would certainly be interested in finding out. Okay. One of the questions here is, it says, did you do a hydraulic evaluation to see if they can eliminate that? And then O&M cost for a modern step system is typically $100 a year. Is that something that you guys find is accurate in the approach that you guys are working through?
I don't know where that information comes from. We provided our evaluation of O&M based off of pump replacement and pump replacement and pump maintenance costs. Which again, it was not based off of a per EDU cost. It was a total cost for the system. So I can't comment whether $100 per EDU is accurate or not.
Okay, thank you. I'll see if we can get that information, because I do think that's helpful for people to know what the actual cost to serve some of those things are. Okay. It says homes in Detroit have a tendency to lose power. I would also say Idanha and Gates and Mill City. More up in the Upper Canyon though, especially in the winter months, sometimes for days. Which system would be better, and what type of systems are better in that case?
I think I would say there are, step systems have backup storage, and gravity systems will have backup generators in the pump stations, and so there's factors to help mitigate that on both step and gravity. When you have 3 or 4 pump stations in a city, depending on which city we're talking about, and they have backup generators if the power goes down for elongated time frame, and the treatment plant as well would have backup generator to provide that that power.
Okay.
And individual homes may have generators as well on their own systems.
Okay. There was a question on user rates. I would say that user rates, while we made some initial estimates in 2017, the whole world has changed since 2017. When we looked at the initial rates, we were getting it underneath the median household income affordability rating. The affordability rating is higher now than it was in the past. So that is something to be contending with. As well as your monthly user rate is depending on all of those factors, right? So if we get less money, that's why it's very, very important that we have everybody, helping to get as much grant money as possible to help get us to the goal of a median household income of 1.4% affordability rating. So I can't say specifically what those numbers are yet, because we still have much to do. Okay, there was another question about timeline. So Peter, I am going to put you on the spot because people need to make life decisions based on what kind of timeline that we're looking at, knowing that full well that Mill City Gates might be completed prior to the Detroit and Idanha areas. So if you could give us some indications, just rough guesstimations.
Yeah, like I said, we need to go through the process of doing the testing, site-specific investigations. That takes a minimum of a year. Then we're working through facilities planning studies. That's another year to go through that process. And then design will take a year. So we are, and there's a permitting process with DEQ in between. And so we're, at least, I would say 3 years. And it's likely longer.
3 years on which pieces? The Detroit Idanha, Mill City Gates, both? What?
I would say Mill City Gates for the rapid infiltration basin concept there, as opposed to the mechanical plant that may happen sooner. We're doing a preliminary, anticipate doing a preliminary engineering report to make that happen sooner. But unfortunately, it doesn't greatly increase or allow for gates to connect to that system without another way of disposing, because the drain fields have the same capacity limitation that the existing water pollution control facility does.
Which, and I don't know if we said this at the beginning, but Mill Cities is at about 95% capacity at this point.
Well, we saw it exceed, actually. That was the early ones before we got the additional data, where it actually did have an exceedance of the peak day capacity.
Okay. Now we are running up on time. I want to make sure that we're answering any questions. There are a lot of questions from John McCormick here, and I know there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that I wasn't able to get to. Even though we're trying to answer them, they're quite lengthy. His questions are specifically between, I think, the gravity system or the step systems and the upfront capital costs and the O&M. And he's very concerned that Keller is not looking at the cost accurately. And so We've taken that comment. He's made that comment in to us already. So we are going to go back and look at those numbers and think a little bit harder. Another question, appears that your O&M cost for STEP was more than 200 annually per connection. What if you overestimated the O&M cost by more than 100%? Does that change the decision matrix?
We'd have to look at that and get back to you. That's a question we'd have to
Yeah.
spend some time looking into. So,
And Michael, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that we are gonna look at these numbers very, very closely again, but these are also just our estimates. And the decision, if nothing too dramatic changes, the board wants to look at this again in August at their board meeting. I don't know if they'll take it on as something to approve at that point. We were sure, and then now we're looking at the numbers again. So we just want to make sure we're in the right place. So I can't say that that would change the decision matrix, but we're going to look at it again. The evaluation criteria is stuff that that the sewer authority discussed over a 3-hour meeting at the beginning of July, and we've had a couple of work sessions in between. So, and then there's some other questions. Beyond the timeline of DEQ, is there any idea how long the time frame for construction would be?
I have not penciled out exactly how the construction, the time frame would be. So I could get back to that question.
Okay. Is there a rough guesstimation on, I know this is so much different than a normal one city scenario. Do you know how long it would take, like in a regular city?
That same question, I would have to spend more time getting more details to be able to answer that question appropriately.
Okay. Thank you for being honest on that. Even though we're going to keep pushing you for dates and timelines. Is the capacity for Mill City before or after the fire, before or after COVID?
Say the first part of the question, I couldn't hear it. Is the
capacity, the capacity issues for Mill City, is that before or after the fires, and before or after COVID?
It was before, and then the one where it actually exceeded was after the fire. The before was into reaching capacity, and then after it exceeded that capacity, and that in the data we added to the analysis.
Okay. Okay. And I tried to get an answer for this one, Marcus. It says, if the gravity system is designed and funded, how long would the roads be torn up?
We'll have to get back down. That's a question we'll talk about more.
I'm gonna throw it like 7 different ways. So
I know.
Okay, let me see if there's anything else here. John, I'll try to get back with you on some of your questions here. And then I owe an answer to about the EDUs. And then all of the questions that we've looked at and answered, we'll go back and try to get some updates if there's any additional information that we can provide. And I'm going to make a call for, since we are a little bit over time, I'm going to put a call out for any additional questions that we can answer here on this town hall. So I will make sure that we let you know that this North Santiam Sewer Authority has a website, northsantiamsewer.net. There is an email address on that. You can put contact us, northsantiamsewer@gmail.com, or go through the contact us on the website. We put information about the upcoming meetings on the website, as well as we have that YouTube as well. It's a YouTube. If you just search out North Santiam Sewer Authority, it'll pop up. All of the meetings from the and work sessions from the last few months are up there. Of course, because of COVID, we started using the YouTube recently, and that has been, I think, pretty effective. It's given an opportunity for people to attend after the fact and kind of get information and all of that. So there's anything else, Ken, is there anything that you would like to add?
No, there's a lot of people. We haven't mentioned the board members.
Oh, yes, please do.
We have Mayor Kirsch, Janet.
Zayn Hall.
Thank you. I know I'm going to get flack for that one. We have Dale Weesey, Joe Parks, Shelley Engel, myself, Ken Woodward. We have Jeff Yoe and Jeff Smith, 2 representatives of each city. We're all volunteers. We've put in a lot of hours. We're trying to look out for our communities, and this is going to move forward. And we're trying to fast track it, but that's a little difficult.
Yeah, I think I would echo that, Ken, that we always wish that we were a year or 2 ahead from where we are.
We would have
And
been.
it sometimes, you know, these processes take a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've been working on it since 2015. So I know Ken has been working on sewer projects up in this area even longer than me. So
2011.
there you go. So, you know, we are trying our very, very best, and these decisions are going to get harder and harder. And we appreciate everybody taking the time to participate. Please continue to ask questions. We want to make sure that we're making the best decisions for the communities as well, but also keeping the financial eye on the long-term sustainability of the sewer authority to keep clean water. Is there anything else, Peter, that you would like to add?
Nope, I appreciate it.
Anything, Dallin?
No comments here.
Okay. And McCoy, you didn't really get to say anything today, but we always appreciate we appreciate all of the work that you've been doing. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I just appreciate so many people coming and listening and participating, and a great presentation with questions and helping us answer and think through all the components of this.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Everybody have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.